Welcome back to The Long Term, the podcast where we talk about recovery in Arkansas. What services have been available? Where have we come in the recovery services that are available? And what needs to happen for a viable outcome for a long term, lasting, fruitful, evergreen solution to recovery from substance abuse? I'm Ty King. And usually I don't do episodes like this. And it's been a while since I uploaded an episode. Um, Wanted to sort of talk about the process of creating an episode of Long Term and what that's like. Initially, this was a project that was to be used as an education tool for institutions, organizations, for individuals to show and listen um, from real stories, people with lived experiences, the people that are on the front lines, people that have lived it, they have been through the recovery process, continue to go through that, the people that are providing services for recovery, and the people who hold political positions and elected leaders, the ones who are making laws and deciding where funding goes for those organizations and for a lot of those individuals. This ultimately decides how many people can receive recovery and recovery services after their addiction to substances. The plan changed because quickly after we got those first few episodes out, which were, they were narrated, there was a script behind my parts, and the people that were being interviewed, their answers were completely off the cuff and from their lived experience. It was a very natural answer. We didn't give them the questions ahead of time. We wanted natural answers from them, and we got that. And so I think those first few episodes are outstanding, and I'm really proud of those. What I wanted to do with this project was have 9 tightly wrapped episodes, each one of them with a different theme, and then end with where do we go from here as far as recovery services that are in Arkansas. I wanted to keep myself out of it and to be objective rather than subjective. But as I was gathering information for new episodes, I realized how often the recovery scene in Arkansas changes. And I don't think it's exclusive just to the state. I think it is a recovery, the recovery services across the United States are also going through this, but there's a whiplash of change at all times. You never know when the house of cards is going to fall, and you have to pick them up and rebuild again. It changes all the time. And those changes make it almost impossible to make evergreen content to where you can put out an episode where you say, well, here's where services are, and this is where we come from. It's changing so rapidly that by the time we publish an episode, everything has changed. So I think we're going to have to change directions with the podcast. Long Term is coming back. We are doing more episodes, but it's going to have to be more than 9 episodes. And it's going to have to be not scripted. It has to be more of us, I guess you'd say. The people behind it, the stories that are in it, boots on the ground. So I wanted to take a minute to sort of introduce me and my connection to the recovery world. So I've never done heavy drugs, never had a substance abuse problem whatsoever, or been in that experience, or know what it's like to come out of the recovery. But I have served on a board of recovery organizations. I do a lot of marketing, a lot of videos, a lot of photographs, website design, just a lot of marketing and relationship building with other organizations across the state and even the U.S. now. These conversations that we have regularly with all these organizations, I don't know how they do it. It's so commendable. These leaders of all these organizations, they pour their heart and soul into these things, and they see the lives that are being changed. And whenever they find their way of pushing, this boulder up the hill, something happens to where their foot slips because it wasn't on their own accord. It was just the rock that was there before that you were about to step on. Now it's gone. So now you've got to figure out how to get your footing again and try to keep pushing. Case in point, the big thing that is happening right now in Arkansas, and I'm sure in every state across the United States right now, something huge. So there was a $26 billion, I'm not sure if it's a settlement, but I know that there was $26 billion that are spread out across the United States right now out of a collective lawsuit against what some people are calling big pharma, but it's mostly the pharmaceutical companies that were pushing prescriptions on opioids, saying that they were non-addictive when it turns out that they were incredibly addictive. So this $26 billion that is being spread around the United States is being divided up by state. It's going to designated organizations, not the ones like, the smaller, nonprofits. It's going to state organizations to be distributed out across cities, counties, private organizations, nonprofit organizations, government institutions, medical institutions, and so far Arkansas has received several $1,000,000 that is to be spread out over the next 18 years. And so one of the things about this funding is that it is not to continue services that have existed before. Even on the websites of the organization that is handing this out. We'll talk about that in future episodes. We even have interviewed the director of this organization in a previous episode. We'll talk more about that and then dive back into those interviews that we had with him to see if we can connect any of the threads of what's happening now to back then. And this money is for specifically new projects to help people keep from being on opioids. Okay, so it is opioid prevention program money. Some organizations have been given $200,000 to start a new program to help prevent people from becoming addicted to opioids. And of course, that can be used for lots of things. And I think, coming from my perspective, not being someone who runs one of those nonprofit organizations, or any of the organizations that's using the funds, but being, just a citizen that creates a lot of media that is, I've seen a little bit more behind the door than I guess the average citizen of seeing how these things typically work. And I want to try to help, as I'm understanding how this works, I want to help the public also understand how this works. Not just about funding, but also about recovery itself and recovery programs. And there are lots of really great things that are happening across the state. Some tiny homes have been announced to be opening, and that's all across the state. And several different programs are doing this. They're buying land, they're building tiny homes to help people to get back on their feet. It's incredible. It's incredible to see the amount of work that still continues to be done. And a lot of it's being done without those millions on the table. And so that's one issue that we're definitely going to follow up on, is seeing, okay, you've got millions of dollars that are sitting on the table. The website says that it is open for anyone to apply, and that there is no time limits, and that it has to be for a new program. And of course, there is a series of things you have to go through in order to be approved. But with that kind of money sitting on the table and it's available to anyone, it kind of opens the doors for anyone to start a program. And there's a vetting process. There's a heavy vetting process before people can actually receive those funds to actually start one of these types of programs. And so we're going to see the good, we're going to see the bad, and we're going to try to help you, the listeners, understand how does it work? Where does the funding come from? What can it be used for? What is it being used for? And how is each organization sort of juggling this and doing it differently? because there's going to be a lot of different takes and a lot of different methods of distributing this money to use it for programs. And also looking at how do you measure the amount of good that you've done with these programs, right? It's kind of unquantifiable, in my opinion, just on the surface level. And we'll definitely do more research, and I may be proven wrong, but we definitely want to look into, okay, how are we measuring the outcome of this? How do you measure how many lives you've saved? How do you measure how many people you've kept from being addicted if they weren't addicted in the first place? If you prevented them from ever trying a substance that would make them addicted, how do you know that you've done that? Right. So how effective are these programs, and how do we know that they're effective? Where are the numbers coming from? We'd love to find the answers out to all of this, and being, of course, fiscally responsible, and also to, see how does this change the recovery services that are available in Arkansas particularly, but I mean across the United States. This is happening state by state. I've looked at all the stories, and it's incredible. There are lots of solutions being offered up. A lot of them are very different from each other. There is not definitively one way of doing, to solving this problem. We've talked about before, what is the most effective form of recovery? Well, recovery has to be done when the person in substance abuse is ready for it, and there has to be a wide variety of different ways that you treat it. There is no one definitive universal way of treating substance abuse, and so prevention is even more unquantifiable, I would say, because if you stopped something from happening from the future, it's almost like time travel, right? So if you know that the future has an event that could change everything, but you prevent that from happening, how do you know that you prevented it from happening? How do you know that that was going to be the results? So there's lots of questions. I'm not sure that we're going to get tons of answers, but we're definitely going to fight to get those answers as much as we possibly can, and to provide those to you, the listeners. Thank you guys for supporting this podcast, and there has been a lot of interest, and I've noticed that the listens have been picking up across Spotify and Apple and YouTube. So I really appreciate your listening and your patience. Long term is definitely coming back. We're producing more episodes, but the show is going to look a little different. And I think because it has to. When originally I wanted to take myself out of it and be off camera and be off mic and just use everybody else, use their stories and sort of tape it all together to try to form a narrative, it doesn't really work that way. I think we built a strong base of those first few episodes, but I think going forward, you can't be objective, because the people, when you're involved in substance abuse recovery, whether you are someone with lived experience, or you're someone that's running the recovery service, or you're just a citizen that lives here, because we are around it all the time. There are people that are addicted pretty nearby to your vicinity right now. There are people who are in recovery also and doing it very well. They found success. And so there are a lot of contingents and a lot of different factors that form the success of recovery. So for us, for the citizens who are living here, there is no objective. It is subjective. How you see recovery in Arkansas, I realize everyone has to be subjective. You have to put yourself into it, because if you don't, then you lose the human element, and then you lose the point, and then you're running in air. Your feet aren't gaining any traction. That rock that I said that disappeared, and you're trying to gain your footing again. If you take the human element out of finding solutions for recovery, then you're not even getting a footing on the hill again. Like you're not even touching the dirt. You're just floating in the air. So we want to be responsible, and that's always been the goal of this podcast, is not being exploitative, and not making anybody with lived experience relive any of their worst moments. We've always asked people when they came in to do their interviews, hey, you can talk as much or as little about your experience as you would like. We can stop at any time we want. If you get to a point where you regret saying something, we could definitely take that out. And, we're very careful with that, and everybody's been very gracious. And so, giving with their story, which is another reason why it's so subjective, is because people are putting everything into it. Like, people have made revelations about their own lives for the first time on the microphone for this podcast, and so we feel, responsible for making sure that these stories are out there and that it's not for nothing. There's definitely an effort that needs to be made. Recovery doesn't happen on its own. Helping these people who have had substance abuse problems, helping them get back on their feet, which in turn helps society as a whole, because these people are here whether you like it or not. We live in a population that we cannot control. We can't control who your neighbors are. You can move and you can decide where you live, but obviously you can't decide who moves in next to you, right? You can't decide who's working at the gas station or building your house, or the people that are, they may be running organizations that you need their services, or they may be connected in different ways that you need them. So the point is that when you start taking an objective approach and you just sort of look at it as numbers, right? This amount of people are addicted, and these amount of people have recovered, and this amount have gone through recovery and then relapsed, and this is what it looks like if we send them out of prison. This is what it looks like when we put them through a recovery program. Those numbers don't really matter if you don't invest in human beings, because that's exactly what we're talking about, is investing in human beings' lives. Nobody's going to respond if you talk to them like a robot. If you say, here's your programming, now take these numbers, take these codes, and now you're fixed. It doesn't work like that. We're human beings, and we have to interact with each other, and you have to think about your place in the world. You have to think also about their place in the world. And recovery is such a broad canvas with so many different strokes, from the people who've lived experiences, the people that are running these organizations, the peer recovery specialists, the appointed leaders, the political realm of this, the people who are making laws, the people who are fighting for more prisons, the people who are fighting for more recovery, the people who are trying to make new exciting projects out of this new settlement from the opioid money. There's a lot going on, and everybody has a place in this. And being sort of trying to put yourself on the outside and saying that's not my problem doesn't solve anything, and you contribute one way or another, right? So you either make the situation better or worse. And so being uninvolved, it sort of provides a relapse in community support, which is huge in recovery. It's been proven over and over and over and over and over and over. For someone to have a chance, they need to have a chance given, right? And it requires a little forgiveness, requires a little understanding. So that's what this is all about. This is about education. What's going on in Arkansas? What is recovery about? What is happening around? And the landscape has completely changed. Where we started from episode 1 and recording all those interviews, the entire landscape of recovery has changed from literally billions of dollars. That's a lot of money. I don't think I need to tell anybody unless you have over $26 billion, but that's a lot of money to be distributed and to be fiscally responsible for. That's a tough job. I don't envy the people who are in charge of distributing that money to the different programs. That's tough. I don't, how do you do that and then, get sound sleep at night without thinking, was it the right thing? Are they going to hold up their end of the bargain? What's going to happen? There's a lot involved. And so I have so much respect for the people that are handling this. But yeah, we definitely want to get the answers for just everyone, whether you're in lived experience or you're a leader or you are just a concerned citizen, involved. You're just curious about how this all works. Me too. That's all this podcast is about trying to find the answers, trying to get a grasp of what the current situation is. And as soon as these episodes come out, they may be dated. You don't know. Like everything can change from day to day. There are still more pharmaceutical companies that are yet to reach a settlement or to have gone to court, to be sued for what they've done before. There was just recently a few of those companies that were together that were being sued under the same ticket tried to settle out of court for millions of dollars, and the judge that was in charge of the case said, no, you can't settle out of court. You are going to have to go through this trial. And so it looks like they're trying to get more money from there, which means that's going to be distributed in more places. It's going to be wild. It's going to be crazy. But we're going to try to get the best understanding that we possibly can and try to make it easy to understand, because that's what we want, for ourselves too, as the production team of Long Term. So I hope that you continue to listen, please, and share it with your friends. Share it with anybody that you think would have some sort of interest in, recovery itself, and what's going on, because this is a really interesting story of what's developing in Arkansas and across, of course, the U.S., but like we're focused on Arkansas, especially for this first season. I can't tell you how many episodes this is going to be. I know it's going to be more than 9 because 9 doesn't cut it. And also we may have some little extra, episodes in between where it's more off the cuff stuff like what I'm doing now. You can absolutely, find us on social media, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. So this podcast, again, is in partnership with Exodus Life, the Arkansas Podcast Collaborative, and American Business Engine, and look forward to learning more along with you and trying to help relay some of this information and try to break it down in simple terms. And just trying to keep our finger on the pulse of the community of like what is happening in recovery. This is a huge problem, obviously. So thank you for listening, and please go subscribe, share it with your friends. On Spotify, you can actually leave comments now, and you can also answer some of the questions. Please rate, review us, please. 5 stars only. I mean, you can do more, I guess, 6 stars. But we would love to have to know what you think about this podcast, and to think about what do you think about this position of all these millions of dollars that are being distributed in these programs that are in the state. What is your opinion? Rather than just talking to the people who are involved in these things, we'd love to hear from just you guys, the ones who are listening. So until next time, I'm Ty King, and these next few episodes are going to sound a little different than what you're used to. Please stick with us, and I hope that we learn together how to move forward on this in a viable and helpful, positive way.